Now on the home stretch of Mountain West men's basketball. Hi, I'm Jesse Kurtz along with Andy Glockner, here to break down the major headlines in the Mountain West. Before we do that, let's get you caught up on the standings as we sit here today on February 10th. Wyoming and San Diego State leading the pack, both at 8-3. Boise State on a 7-game win streak, now at 7-3. Colorado State at 7-4. Fresno State 6-4. New Mexico 6-5, as is Utah State. UNLV 4-6, as Air Force is 4-8. Nevada is 3-7, and San Jose State is 0-11. You look at these standings, Andy. Right now, 7 teams within 2 games of first place. Still totally up for grabs. Really anyone's race in the Mountain West. Let's talk about a couple of teams that are on hot streaks. The Air Force Falcons. 2 wins against KenPom top 100 in the last week. They beat New Mexico. They beat Wyoming. Against the Cowboys, 4 Falcons scored in double figures. Are you surprised with the way the Falcons under Coach Pilipovich have been able to steer in the right direction here in the last week?
Yes and no. I mean, we talked about Air Force all season. I thought they were going to be one of those teams in the bottom half of the league, projected to be in the bottom half of the league, that would be a little bit better, a little bit feistier than I think people projected them before the season. Then they've had all sorts of roster and personnel issues. Finally got Max Jan back again this weekend. He wasn't huge statistically for them, but just having him back was a huge lift for them. Air Force probably played its 2 best games of the season, I would think. Certainly their 2 best wins of the season. We mentioned the KenPom top 100. They hadn't beaten anybody close to that all year before this. So now, are they going to be a spoiler is the question, and that tees up this week's game against Boise State, a team you mentioned that suddenly has ripped off 7 straight wins and is not only in the conversation now, but is the conversation in the league.
Well, let's go right there. Boise State, 7 straight wins. They beat San Diego State 61-46 on Sunday. How much does this put them into that conversation of the NCAA tournament? Obviously, there's still plenty of work left to do, but a team that was left for dead in January all of a sudden is right back in that conversation, to your point.
0-3 and lacking Anthony Drimmick, who's out for the year with an injury. Obviously, Derek Marks has been spectacular. We talked about him as a potential Mountain West Player of the Year candidate on our show recently. But nobody expected 7 straight wins. I mean, let's be honest about this. But they are where they are now. And now, after beating San Diego State on Sunday, the schedule remaining is there for Boise State to be a major factor in this title race. They are even in losses with the 2 teams ahead of them. They certainly have opportunities, and their schedule, much like San Diego State's, is a little bit lighter down the stretch than some of the other contending teams. So when you look at the bigger picture and you say at large consideration where Boise State is, they're starting to peek into the bracketology, next 4 or next 8 out, whatever it may be. People are starting to look at their profile a little bit more. And when you look at the projected RPI, RPI forecast and those types of sites, if Boise State can go 6-2 the rest of the way, which is reasonable with their schedule, they've got a couple tough road games, the home games are manageable, maybe they nick an upset on the road somewhere, gets them to 13-5 in the league, that would put them in the ballpark of around 50 in the RPI heading into the postseason. That is a viable candidate. I don't know that that gets them there, but that sets them up to do some work in the Mountain West tournament, and a team that, as you said, was all but left for dead, might be one of the more viable at-large candidates, which is maybe the most shocking thing in the league this year.
A lot of the credit certainly goes to Derek Marks and what he's been able to do over the last month or so with Boise State. Think about this. There are 1,795 Division I players that average at least 6 points a game, but only one shoots 50% from the field, 50% from three-point range, and at least 82.5% on free throws, and that's Derek Marks. And he's certainly done most of his damage in the second half. He's a closer, and certainly that is scary to opposing coaches, and this week's opposing coach, Dave Pilipovich of Air Force.
So before the game, I'm going to tell Derek we're playing 2 first halves on Wednesday. So when we go in the locker room, we're coming back out, we're going to sing the anthem again and line up and give starting lineups. So we're going to play 2 first halves on Wednesday, so he doesn't get that second half roll.
The Air Force Boise State game is a Mountain West Network exclusive game. You can only see that right here on the Mountain West Network Wednesday at 7 o'clock. What are the keys for both teams in this game that all of a sudden has a lot riding on it as it relates to the conference race?
Air Force, 3 of the last 4 wins, 3 of the last 4 games they've won in the league. The reason, while their shooting has come around a little bit, it's really been their defense. Their defense has stopped getting lit up. In all 3 of those wins, they allowed less than 0.9 points per possession. You do that against any team, you're going to be in the game. Boise State, as you said, it's a Derek Marks show. He's had sort of that Deontay Burton-ish transformation as a senior, like Deontay Burton had it at Nevada last year. After a couple of years of maybe some dicey decision-making for a really talented guy, it's all come together this year, more efficient, more effective in what he does, and able to carry the team with and now without Anthony Drimmick. Exceedingly impressive, and they'll need him tomorrow night against an Air Force team that now obviously is feeling a little bit more confident.
Had a great crowd against San Diego State on Sunday, a sellout crowd at Taco Bell Arena that saw San Diego State fall in that game. J.J. O'Brien for the Aztecs, who are now 8-3 on the year. His third double-double of the season, went 16-10. With Poli still out, don't know if and when he would come back. How much is on a guy like J.J. O'Brien, a senior leader, been around the program here for 3-4 years? How much is on him to make sure they continue down the path? They're still in a tie for first place. No reason to panic. How much is on J.J. down the stretch?
I think it's on whoever can provide them offense. You know, maybe right now that's J.J. O'Brien. We talked previously about Akil Quinn. Winston Shepard has his moments. San Diego State just needs a bit of offense to get there if their defense is performing as it is. And I think that's the question now that should start concerning San Diego State. 3 losses in the league now. All 3 of those games, or 3 of their last 5 games now, they won 1 of them. But 3 of their last 5 games, they've allowed at least 1.1 points per possession. That's way above their norm. And that's a rate that I don't think they can sustain at. San Diego State is not going to consistently win games that are going to be 75-70 in this league. Now you saw what happened. They only allowed 61 against Boise State in a lower possession game, only scored 46. They've got to find a little bit more offense, and I don't know if it's going to be one guy consistently, because I don't think they have that guy on this year's team. What they also need to do is stop getting into 15, 17-point holes in league games. All 3 of their losses, basically, they've been down huge early, rallied all the way back, nearly got there, and then fell off toward the end. This margin was a little bit bigger than the other 2 losses. San Diego State is probably, if we had to pick a favorite right now, I would probably still lean with them, but it's not a hard lean at this point. Everybody at the top has questions.
San Diego State has been super at home. They've won 23 straight at Viejas Arena against the teams that are coming to Viejas Arena down the stretch. They've won 6 in a row against Wyoming at home, 11 in a row against Colorado State, 4 in a row against Boise State, and 2 in a row against Nevada. So maybe some home cooking would propel them to the regular season tie.
Yeah, that's the schedule advantage we've talked about, and San Diego State has used up a little bit of its margin for error. They're going to have to take advantage of Viejas.
Speaking of margin for error, Wyoming really struggled without Larry Nance in the lineup against the Falcons. The Cowboys still 8-3, but clearly here's a guy that they miss sorely when he's out of the lineup. That just further speaks to how much value he provides to them. How much of it is a concern if he's not in the lineup for them?
Well, it's a huge concern. They just got blown out at Air Force, and that's with no disrespect to Air Force, but it's not just a Larry Nance issue. He may very well be the best player in the league, but they have a bigger problem in their front court with Alan Herndon also out with mono, and Matt Sellers having left the program a couple weeks before that, in part because he wasn't really getting any run. I believe he wanted to go do something in his private life and made a decision to leave the program. Now all of a sudden they're down to Derek Cook and nobody. They have one other big on the roster who's a very underprepared freshman. They're playing Jason McManaman and Charles Hankerson at the 4. It's a much different look against Colorado State. Obviously a terrific win at home, but they went very deep into their roster early, and that was with Nance in the lineup. They have to have him back. You can't lose your best player. And it's frustrating for me as a fan of Mountain West basketball and of Wyoming and what Larry Scheid has done there, that this is the 3rd straight year that they've been sabotaged by injury in league play, or in this case, illness. They lost Leonard Washington, or he was vastly handicapped a couple of years ago when that team was starting to play pretty well. Last year, obviously, the ACL injury for Nance. This year, they're 8-2 and riding high off that win against Colorado State, and then they get whacked with illness. It's a frustrating time for them because they're also a team that does not have the RPI in their favor, does not have necessarily the non-conference record to carry them. They needed to get, probably for at-large consideration, a piece of the title. Now, depending on when Larry Nance comes back and how effective they are in these road games, they might not be able to get there, and that to me is a shame.
No question. They did pick up a very impressive win midweek over Colorado State. The Rams, maybe a little bit of hangover as they started against UNLV on Saturday. Fell behind big to the Rebels, but credit to Larry Eustace and company. They go on a 17-point run, come all the way back, and they did it with good, solid team basketball, 24 assists on 36 buckets. Colorado State, right now in many people's eyes in bracketology is a team that is still in the NCAA tournament. How impressed were you with the way they didn't panic and kept themselves afloat against UNLV down the stretch?
Probably a season-saving 30 minutes for them. They were staring 6-5 in the league in the face, while they did run the table in non-conference play and beat some teams that the average fan probably wouldn't give as much credit to. That's why their RPI numbers are a lot higher than maybe Pomeroy or maybe general perception. I don't know if that was going to carry them, especially if they ended up looking at a 4th place finish or 5th. That wasn't going to do it for them. They're down huge early at home against UNLV. They just got manhandled at Wyoming. This was a massive gut check for Colorado State. They pulled the game out. UNLV missed an open shot at the buzzer to win it. Doesn't matter how you get it done. They're 7-4, and then it was compounded on the rest of the weekend by Wyoming getting blasted at Air Force and then San Diego State losing. So now all of a sudden Colorado State went from potentially being 3 games out of first to being a game back of 2 of the leaders, with Boise State tucked in there too. So they're very much right in the mix. They have an opportunity, obviously, when they go down to San Diego State to take care of some business themselves.
I know it's going to be a wild race in Las Vegas when it comes to the Mountain West tournament. As we said, 7 teams right now within 2 games of first place. If you want to see the Mountain West tournament in person, make sure you go on to the MW.com/2015 to get your tickets to what should be one of the most exciting conference tournaments that we've seen in recent years, because really it's anybody's race. For Andy Glockner, I'm Jesse Kurtz. Thanks for logging on to the Mountain West Network, and enjoy another week of Mountain West men's basketball.